In this video, we're going to take a look at styling links in Dreamweaver. Now, a link is like another piece of text insofar as that you want to make it look attractive, but it also has a function. For example, an H1 signals something about that kind of heading. Links have somewhat more complex signals to make because they have various states. So we have to approach them a little more cautiously. And we have to make two decisions. The first and most obvious is what a link is going to look like, its color, its weight, etc., etc. And the second decision is where we're going to apply this. Is it going to be all the way through the page, or will certain sections, for example, the navigation bar or the aside, have different styles for their links? Links have four states. The first state is the up state, and that's when someone first comes to your page and they haven't moused over anything or they haven't clicked anything, and that simply is a signal to the reader that this in fact is a link. I've also included a:*link to show you what the CSS code is to signal that. The visited state, as the name implies, says you've been here before. Now, in the early days of the web, designers would worry that their readers would get lost in cyberspace and wouldn't remember where they were and if they had seen a page before. Contemporary designers tend not to worry about that and, in fact, keep the same appearance for the up and the visited links. But that's a decision you can make. The third state is the over or the a:*hover state, and that, as the name implies again, means what a link looks like if a user mouses over it. And finally, the down state is when a user not only mouses over a link, but presses the mouse button. So we have these four states, and as I say, we have to think about how we want to signal each one of them. Now, one critical point is when we create these states or edit them later, the final order has to be exactly what you see here. Up, visited, over, and down. And if they don't have this particular order, your links are not going to work properly. Now, for appearance, we have some obvious choices. The color, the decoration, and what we mean there is really whether there's an underline or not, the weight, whether it's bold or regular, and perhaps the background. So these are the choices that we're going to make about how our links are going to look like. We really don't have a choice, however, when we go from state to state. For example, we can't switch the font family. We can't switch the font size, or the weight, or the style. Because if we do, that is going to affect the text that surrounds the link. And generally what it ends up doing is causing the page to jump. And that's very, very distracting. Now the last question, and the second decision that I referred to earlier, is where we're going to apply it. And as I said, we could apply it everywhere. But in fact, you'll probably want to apply a set of link styles everywhere but. That is, everywhere but the navigation bar, everywhere but the aside, or whatever other decisions you make. So let's see this in action. And rather than just listen, why don't you work along with me? Here we are in Dreamweaver. And as you can see, I've created another small site with a template and some pages that are based on it. And I've also created a file called stylingdemo.css. I've done this previously. And this CSS file is where I'm storing all the various styles for this particular site. And the template page is linked to the CSS page. So that means that all the pages that have been based on the template are also linked to the CSS file. So if I change any one of these pages, the style of links for any one of these pages, and then save my CSS style sheet, all the links and styles on my site will be updated. It's kind of like working with a template. And just to show you, I've already created some styles for this site. And the first one is that chunk of code that we've been using all semester in the starter page. And this is the one that simply says, turn the header, the section, these HTML5 semantic tags, display them as blocks. And I've also created a style for the H1 tag and just simply said, make it pretty large, 48 pixels. So we're ready now to start thinking about our link styles. And the first kind of style I want to create for my link is a very general one. And this is going to be one that is going to work everywhere on my page. So I'm going to go into the placeholder text in the aside, and I'm going to make that into a link. Now if I just put in a hash mark, just like that, and hit return, that's not a real link, but it's a kind of dummy link, and that's going to work just fine for purposes of demonstration. It's not going to go anywhere, but it's going to behave like a link. And if I click away from there, you can see that Dreamweaver has changed the appearance of that text so that it now looks like a typical link. That is, it's blue and it's underlined. Well, I'm going to select it one more time. And this time I'm going to create a new rule based on this piece of text. So I'm going to go to the new rule, the new CSS rule dialog. And rather than working with class or tag, I'm going to go to the compound section. Now, as soon as I do that, Dreamweaver, which is being pretty smart, has figured out that I'm in the body, I'm in the aside, I've selected some paragraph text, and that it's also a link. And so it's displayed all these pieces of information. But I want a very general kind of link right now. So I'm going to click the less specific button until I end up only with something that says A. And this allows me to put in the first state, that is the up state, the A link state. And just to go quicker, I'm also going to put in the visited state at the same time. So what I'm telling Dreamweaver now is to create styles that are going to be applicable to links and to visited states everywhere in my page. And just one note before I click OK, you notice my rule is going to be defined in the styling demo.css page. And if that didn't show up, I could select it from that drop-down menu. I'm going to click OK, and I've got a dialog that's going to quickly let me put in the attributes for the A and visited state. So I'm just going to do something very simple. I'm going to make them red, I'm going to make them bold, and I'm going to take out the underline. So I am using no text decoration. And when I click OK, you can see what happened. Well, not only did that little chunk of text that I selected change to red, but so did the navbar links, page 1, page 2, and page 3. And that's because if you look back in the CSS panel, the rules that I've defined are the most general. It says A link and A visited, and that means apply them everywhere. And we'll work with that just in a moment, but let's finish the job. Let's now go back and select that same piece of text and create new rules, this time for the hover and for the active state. And again, I'm going to go to compound, and again, I want very general rules, so I'm going to click less specific until I get just the A, and then I'm going to enter A:hover and A:active. And once again, I'm checking to make sure that these rules are going to be created in the styling demo.css page, and click OK. Well, just for the sake of contrast, I'm going to make the color a kind of forest green color, but I'll leave it as bold, and I will use a text decoration this time. I'm going to make it into an underline, and click OK. Well, of course, I can't see anything yet because this new rule only applies in a browser. So let's take a look at the page in a browser. And you can see the up states are red, but when I mouse over the links, they change their appearance. They go from red without any text decoration to green with an underline. So that's our general rule. And as I say, that rule and the A link and the A visited rule, those 4 rules are going to be applied everywhere on my page. But let's suppose that I want to have a different style of link depending on where in my page I am. So since we're working on the aside, let's do that. So let's select that same piece of text that we have been working with and create a new rule. But this time, when we go to the compound dropdown, we're going to leave what Dreamweaver presents us with as is. That is, we're going to accept that this rule is going to apply in the body, but only within the aside, and then only for text which is got a p tag around it. And again, I'm going to do what I did before, a link and a visited. Now remember, what we've done here that's different from the first set of rules is that we've said explicitly these are not general rules as they were in the first instance, but they're going to apply to any paragraph text within the aside. And again, it's going to be in the stylingdemo.css file, and we're going to create that. So let's choose a very different color. Let's take, something, I'm sorry, let's take a purple color. And we'll make that bold, just as before. And again, we'll set the text decoration to none. And when we click OK, you can see that just that link that's in the aside has been affected. The other links, because they're general links, are not changed by a rule that applies only to the aside. Let's do that one more time for the hover and active state. So I'm going to select that same link that we've been working with. I'm going to create a new rule, and I'm going to leave just as Dreamweaver presents the information, what that rule, where that rule should be applied. And this time I'm going to create the hover state and the active state. I'm going to do that all together, and again it's in the right file, and I'll click OK. And just to, this is not going to be aesthetically pleasing, but it will give us some context. I'm going to give it a very bright, kind of a horrible green color, and I set the text decoration, to underline. So now I'm going to look at this thing in my browser. Actually, the first thing I'm going to do, because I've made some changes, is I'm going to save everything so things will work a little better. And I'm going to go back to my browser. And this time, when I mouse over the link in the aside, it changes to that rather lurid green that I've been using. But the other links remain just as they were. And just to show you, we're going to create one more link down here in the section. And that link, because it's not in the aside, is going to be governed by the general rule. So, just to reiterate, I've created 2 rules, or actually 4 rules for the link, visited, hover, and active state. And these are very general rules. As you can see, they don't specify where those rules are going to be applied. So a browser is going to say, I'm going to apply them everywhere until I'm told differently. And the next set of rules only apply within the aside, and again, only apply within paragraph tags. And other than that, the general rule will apply. Now, of course, we can go ahead and add more specific rules, but for the moment, the key to see is that we've made some choices for each of the 4 states, and we've also said we're going to apply some of them everywhere, but another set of rules we're going to apply only within the aside.